What's up, everybody? This is our 15th episode. Welcome back to another episode of Light Lessons with Sierra. I am so excited to share this episode with you. Now that we're at 15 episodes, I feel like I should let you in on some things that happen behind the scenes, which is just recognize that when I film these episodes, I then go back and edit, which means I get to revisit these conversations over and over and over again. And I get re-inspired each time. So I'm so excited every time that I get to do the intro and share the video of the week with you. This week, I was re-inspired over and over and over again by my extraordinary friend, Thom Sesma. For those of you that are meeting him for the first time now, you are in for a treat. You will see immediately why I asked Thom to be on an episode of Light Lessons with Sierra. And when I asked him to speak about the light lesson, openness, he knew exactly what he needed to do. He is such a light worker. He has so much wisdom. And the things that he shares with us are just invaluable. There are some really good nuggets in there. So if you don't have paper and writing things down, get it now, because you're just gonna keep writing. I'm really excited for this week. Welcome back to another episode of Light Lessons with Sierra, featuring Thom Sesma.
Oh my God. Hi, my darling. How are you?
Can we just sit in this moment for a second?
Mm-hmm.
I'm so happy to see you.
This is wonderful.
Thom Sesma, folks. Thom!
It's so good to see you.
Everyone, I am really excited because this is my extraordinary friend, Thom Sesma. We met, is it 6?
7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
Doing a little show together that we still hope will at this point, we're hoping everything will come back. But I just loved you from the moment that I met you. One, we have very similar work ethic in the room, like very similar work ethic.
Very much so.
But then it was our conversations that really solidified my love for you. And just,
Well, you know what I think was so interesting is our conversations were always grounded in work and what we were doing that day, and so much how we live our day-to-day lives, and I think live spiritually, channeling our spirit through our work was what made it so easy to talk to you, and why we just sort of leapfrog into those conversations about soulfulness and existence and patience and openness.
in this series, I gave everybody a list of words. With Thom, I did not give you a list of words. Or did I give you a list of words and I was like, it's this one?
You threw out, there were sort of some informal ideas, but they were all very, what was great about every one of those words is that they were not specific, and yet they were so articulate. They captured so much. I've been watching all of your videos, and it seemed to me that every single one of the words that came up, they all sort of encapsulated everything that everyone had been talking about. But it kind of reminds me of one really interesting thing, in that in all of our existence, and all of our soulfulness, and all of our searching, there is basically one idea. There's a single idea that we all deal with every single day. And I guess, to put it in a very, very awkward way, it's how we get back to the center.
Yes. I want to start with a definition that I looked up. The definition of openness is lack of restriction, accessibility. Then it said acceptance of or receptiveness to change or new ideas.
If somebody came up to me and said, what do you know about openness? I would say, I am the last person that you should ask, because I am none of those things. In my mind, at least, in my intellect. But I guess I am,
Yes.
to the degree that I believe that we're hardwired for change. In order to own up to that wiring, you have to be receptive. You have to be open. You know what you have to be? You have to be curious.
Yes, you do.
Even if you have a destination, you want to see what happens on the journey there.
Yes.
I think that so much about how people in modern Western culture want to change is always based on things that they don't want.
Mm.
You know, I have to get rid of this, I have to get rid of this, I have to get rid of this. This is what I don't want. These are my ambitions. My whole life, my idea of happiness is defined by I don't want to be poor. I don't want to work hard. I don't want this. They may not think this, we may not think this, I may not think this on a conscious level, but in essence, we live our lives in avoidance rather than openness about what any of those things that you don't want might have to offer you.
Yep.
You and I have been in enough rehearsals where you've had your script, you prepared the first day of rehearsal, you've done your week and a half, 2 weeks of table work, and you've got all of these ideas forming, and then your director comes up one day and asks you to do something that you just disagree with completely because it has absolutely nothing to do with your understanding of it. And you do it anyway because that's your job. And you find out that you were absolutely wrong.
Yes. You resisted at first because it's like, no, because my idea was this and I have solidified that idea.
It's almost as if you've got this 15,000 page novel called War and Peace in Sierra Boggess, and you're focused on one paragraph on page 65, and you're saying, that's it, that's the center, and you haven't read the rest of the book. You have no idea where the rest of this book goes, even if you've done 2 weeks of table work. That's what openness is to me. I guess it's a way of finding your way into that. Everything is a journey. I'm a pilgrim. I'm a peregrino. I became a peregrino when I walked the Camino de Santiago. I've walked it twice now, in 2016 and in 2019. I walked with my wife. For those of you who don't know, the Camino de Santiago is a pilgrimage route that has been in existence since the 9th century. It's a 500-mile walk across the north of Spain. It is a walk from different points in Europe, but traditionally the modern Camino, as we know it now, began in the 20th century, and it starts in the Pyrenees and it goes right across the north of Spain through a couple of major cities, but mostly a lot of small towns, to the city of Santiago de Compostela. Below the cathedral, in the crypt of the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, are buried the remains of St. James the Apostle. So for Christians, because it's an ancient Christian pilgrimage route, it is a direct connection to the Gospels, to the life of Jesus. And it still exists for all sorts of mysterious reasons, because why on earth would anyone in the 21st century want to put on a pair of hiking boots and carry a backpack and then walk 500 miles across the north of Spain? It's a moving meditation. It's a journey to the, yes, a physical destination, a spiritual destination, but really, what's the destination? Every pilgrimage is a journey to the inner self. Every pilgrimage is a moving meditation where all you have is this single moment. All you have in your entire life. Anything that you've had before, success, failure, good, bad, right, wrong, none of it matters. The only thing that matters is the next step you take. And that's really it. It's physically, the next physical step you take is all you have.
How true for this time right now, especially.
You know, Sierra, that I'm a very spiritual person. I'm a religious person. I'm a practicing Roman Catholic, very progressive, sort of a left-leaning, woke side of Roman Catholicism. I talked to my spiritual director, who's sort of like my counselor. He's a priest at my parish. And we were talking about the pandemic. And he said, oh, it's time for another pilgrimage. And at first I thought, well, what does he mean? I can't go to Spain. I can't walk. I mean, we have to be shut down. We have to be safe. And what he was talking about was an interior pilgrimage. That you can do this at any time. Any of us can. You do it through prayer, through meditation, through contemplation, through moments of quiet and solitude, taking that journey to the inner self. Because in the end, even walking across Spain, we walked an average of 17 miles every day. What was really at work for us was what I called the interior pilgrimage, the interior walk. I'm not going to say that Spain disappears. You still experience that. You still experience fellowship and hardship beautiful scenery. It's funny. Somebody asked me once, they said, oh, the sightseeing must have been great. And I remember thinking, I looked at Penny, my wife, and I said, do you remember sightseeing? Neither of us really recalled a moment where we were sightseeing, because what we experienced was being immersed in the landscape, being part of the route,
Yep.
part of this path where thousands, if not millions, of pilgrims had trod since the late 9th century, doing the exact same thing that we were doing. Of course, they weren't wearing really nice, expensive boots that we got at REI. No, they were wearing sandals, but they were doing the same thing, and they were on the same journey. They were on that same walk to the center of themselves. Up until the middle of March, international tourism has been such an exploding industry that a lot of people are going for an adventure vacation. And some of the connections, some of the fellowships that pilgrims shared in is slowly but surely vanishing, because it's becoming less transformational and more transactional. And I think one of the reasons for that is the nature of our culture now is really rooted in how it can control things so I can get something back. I don't want to say that that's a bad thing. Nobody should be condemned for that unless it's taken to extreme levels. But I think I said earlier that people want to create something that's based on all the things they don't want. That's control. That is being in charge. I would dare to say that's putting yourself in a position where you are assuming the ultimate creative position. You're making yourself God.
Wow.
Right? And when you do that, how can you be open to anything?
Right.
Because you're assuming that you already know things. One of the things about the Camino is you don't have to make plans. For 900 years, for 1,000 years, you haven't had to make plans, right? You just throw your pack on, you start walking. You have these great little credentials. They're called pilgrim passports. They give you entry into these little inns called albergues, where you can stay for just a few euro. You can stay overnight. Sometimes you're in a big giant barracks with 70 other pilgrims. Sometimes you're in a small room with 2 or 3, 4 other pilgrims. All along the way, there are cafes that have special menus. I mean, the charity that's extended to peregrinos is remarkable. It's something that you don't really experience here in the States or in a lot of modern Western countries. Why don't you experience charity? Because it puts you in a position of being uncomfortable. You have to embrace this sense of powerlessness, that someone else is going to help you.
Oh, that's
someone else is going to offer you a place to stay. Someone else is going to offer you a cheap meal. Interesting, all of these albergues were called hospitals. That's what they were called, because pilgrims would walk a lot longer than 17 miles every day back then. And their feet would be bleeding, they'd be dehydrated, they'd be begging for a meal. But normally they would need to be taken care of. And that tradition still exists in some of these towns, many of these towns, which only exist because of the Camino, even now. To put yourself in that position of powerlessness is a huge challenge, and I think the biggest challenge for the modern pilgrim. What's happened now is you can book ahead, so you don't have to worry about where you're going to sleep. Prior to this, pilgrims would walk. You'd get to a town, and there would be any number of little albergues where you could stay. But it was pretty much first come, first serve. But it was an experience that all pilgrims shared with each other. And so, in a weird way, there was this unifying thing that happened because of circumstances. And the other thing is that everybody would sort of get up at the same time and get on the road and start walking at the same time, anytime between 5 in the morning and 7 in the morning. You'd see first a couple, then tens, then hundreds of pilgrims walking down the street, all walking down the road through little country trails or through vineyards, all walking to the same place, doing the same thing. Now that you can book ahead, and if you don't want to carry your backpack, now you can actually have there's this little cottage industry of baggage shippers. You can have your bag moved ahead. Some people do that, some people don't. If you book ahead, you don't have to get up so early. So there's not a group of pilgrims walking together. You're not.
There's not a collective.
There's not a collective experience. And in a strange way, everyone's they might be shipping their baggage forward, but what they're bringing with them is kind of a spiritual and an emotional and intellectual baggage, because they are making the Camino as convenient as they possibly can. I'm not going to say easy, because it's still hard.
No, I like the word convenient.
Yeah. But we live in a culture of convenience.
We do.
And I think that that's the hardest thing about this pandemic shutdown, is that it inhibits our convenience. For most of us, it doesn't make our lives. I mean, I don't know how many of us could say we're suffering through this pandemic, but we're being desperately inconvenienced.
Yes.
It's manifested itself in some really, really unfortunate ways, here in the States at least. But those conveniences have become, I think, part of our cultural identity, and to a degree, part of our individual identities, which I think is why you want to go on these pilgrimages, on these interior journeys, because you want to find out what the road gives you, not what you can take from.
Yes. That goes back to when you said, when I read the definition of openness, and you thought, I'm not those things, but you are those things, because I think anybody who ever says, I am an open person, I am an empath, you're not. You don't have to declare it, because you just are it.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you go on these journeys, that you walked the Camino not once but twice, is there something, do you think, within the human condition that wants to try these journeys where you have to be completely open?
Yeah, I honestly do think that most people have the desire to do that. It's okay. You meditate. I know this. Yes. I meditate. To a degree, the Camino is like this. If you want to consider any pilgrimage like this a moving meditation, what you're basically walking away from is all of the things that you have, all of the conveniences, if you will, the conveniences that define your identity. Yeah, you have a destination. You've got this beautiful scenery that if you want to go sightseeing, you can, or you can immerse yourself in this experience. But like I said, all you have is that next step. It's sort of a death and resurrection metaphor. It is necessary for all of us to die to this world if we want to gain a new reality, if we want to gain a new presence, a new persona. Why else would we be inclined to search for something else? Most people in my generation, your generation, have at one point in their lives gone on a conscious spiritual journey. They have set out and said, you know what, my life isn't working out. I got to do this. Or there's got to be something more than what we have. And so what do? I can only say that for most of my adult life, I was raised a Catholic, but I was a nominal Catholic. I fell away from the church in college for the same reason a lot of people who were raised in a specific religious faith fall away in college, because you experience things, whether that be politics, sexual identity, drugs, alcohol, partying, existentialism, philosophy, anything becomes attractive to you simply because you haven't known it before. Oh, I haven't known it before. What does that mean? It must mean I'm hardwired for change, right? But you want to control that change in some way. So what did I do? I think for easily the next 30 years of my life, I tried everything. I explored every one of the world's major religions. I dabbled in every one of those, in different spiritualities, in what I think a lot of people derisively call New Age philosophy. And all of these things had value. I'm going to say that I jumped in waist deep, but I never really immersed myself. Because what I was really searching for was a divine being of some kind, of my understanding, that was convenient, that would make me feel better about the things that I had already decided I wanted to do. I wasn't looking for a God who would challenge me. I wasn't looking for a God who would say, okay, Let's wipe the slate clean, start over. I wasn't looking, oh gosh, well, if I'm going to, let's, since we're talking sort of religion here, let's get to scripture. I wasn't looking for a God who would ask me to come back to Eden. I was trying to bring God out of the garden and say, oh, look at what I can do. The real journey, what we're hardwired for, that change that we're hardwired for, is a U-turn to get back to the center of the garden.
Oh, it's a U-turn to get back to the center of the garden. That's awesome.
And that's not backtracking.
No.
That's coming home.
Let's put it in literal terms. When you make a U-turn, it's because, oh, I made a mistake. I need to get, you know what I mean? Yeah, we're not saying let's reverse. That's backtracking to this reverse dangerously back.
Yeah, exactly.
Like U-turn because it's like, oh, wrong way. Do you think, Thom, that also openness is our birthright and that we're hardwired for openness? And just as you learn things in life, as doubt becomes learned behavioral, that's what starts closing us. So we're actually on this journey to be more open and open to the things of like what you're saying. Yeah.
So, I think the word you just used, doubt, is so important because we've given it such a negative connotation. Those are vital tools that we have to learn, from which to learn. We all envision something that we want to be or something that we want, and we eliminate those things that we don't want. And one of those things is doubt. We say that failure are all bad things, when in fact they're all good things. They're all part of the journey. They're all part of walking forward. I say about the Camino that it doesn't matter what direction you're walking in, as long as you can follow your feet. As long as you can take that next step, you're going in the right direction. And that might be to the right or to the left. There's never a wrong path that you're on. It's still a journey to the self. One of the things I learned early in my practice of contemplative prayer is the power of distraction.
Oh, wow.
We're all distracted in meditation. And there's this wonderful spiritual teacher, now gone, passed away last year, Father Thomas Keating. And he talks about distraction a lot. And he says you can do one of two things. Rather than having it torture you, you can just brush it aside. Like you can just envision your arm brushing aside your distraction gently. Or you can make that distraction the center of your meditation. Follow it. Where is it leading you? What does it mean? Is that leading you to the core of yourself? Or is it leading you to an understanding of the center of that distraction? And if it is, what are you learning about it? Chances are you're learning about that distraction. You're learning the very same thing about yourself. Or you are arriving at the same place that you're trying to arrive during your contemplation or your meditation, which is this core of nothingness, this core of emptiness, emptying out the vessel.
That is extraordinary.
And is it always successful? No. Sometimes it leads to another distraction. Sometimes it's like word association, but it's a journey. I think that the whole idea of meditation and contemplation is that you try to eliminate the concept of success and failure, of good and bad. And I think that, oh God, I was distracted. I couldn't even meditate. Oh, I'm such a failure. Well, maybe you're not, maybe that's the point.
That's so good. Oh, I can't wait to use that in my meditation. All these distractions happen or things trying to get your attention. Some I might want to do this and some I might want to follow because they might be there for a deeper reason. And we get there via what we deemed an unworthy distraction.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that funny? We want to control our meditation.
Sure we do.
We are of two selves. There is, I think what we could reasonably call the surface self, which certainly has value. And then there's the true self. And, you can guess that what I've been talking about is that, the pilgrim is on the journey to the true self all the time. But what we invest in our lives from the time we're born is that surface self. And that surface self is based on transaction, for all intents and purposes. How we control things, for lack of a better way of saying it, and it's really awkward and it sounds negative. What can I get out of this?
Right.
How does it serve me? And we believe, oh, well, if I've taken all of these really wonderful things, it's going to serve me in a wonderful and spiritual way, and I'll be a better person, I'll be a happier person. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But it's also not the true self, because you're still trying to shape it. You're still trying to control it. How do you strip that away? How do you die to that self? I don't know what the answer is. I don't think you can do it in a conscious way. I'm going to fall back on that wonderful topic. It was the last video of yours that I watched, and the word was surrender. I think you surrender all that. You can't be open to anything unless you surrender, unless you give it all up, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
I'm so grateful that this is the word that we settled on, openness, because it encompasses so many things. What does it require? It requires courage, it requires surrender, and yet it requires none of these things too. It just requires presence.
Right, it has its own thing. All of these words are trying to get us to the same place, the journey inward in the center. But there's a reason that each one is its own thing. Even though it's all trying to say the same thing, there's a reason that each one, just as openness is its own thing, but it takes from every single other.
Yeah, it really does. And you know what? It's not any single one of those things. It's the space in the middle that is
so good.
I say this a lot to my acting students, and I say this, it's actually something that I saw in a documentary. I heard Shelley Winters talk about this.
Okay.
And she was talking about the great film director, George Stevens. He was giving her a note and said, Shelley, why are you working so hard? And, she's one of the great method actresses of the American theater. He said, why are you working so hard? And, she wanted to make sure that it was right. And he said, you're trying too hard to be a great actress. He says, great acting is not something that you do. Great acting is not something that the other guy does. Great acting is that thing that happens in the middle, in the air between you. It's when the ball is in the air. It's not, and you're passing it back and forth. It's when that ball is in the air.
Yes.
That the magic is happening.
Oh.
Openness and courage and surrender. These things don't exist by themselves. They exist in exchange with something else. I live and sort of work by the philosophy that I learned in the very, very short time. Literally, I think it was a period of 3 or 4 days that I was lucky enough to work with Julie Taymor when she came in to put the final set on one of the productions of Lion King. That she was getting frustrated because we weren't getting something. I'm not sure what we weren't getting. It was something that she didn't see that needed to be there. Because to my eye and to the eyes of a lot of other people who were watching, everything was perfect. And she said, okay, what's the first thing you see in the show after the giraffes? You see this cheetah crossing the stage, right? Comes across downstage, right? This beautiful cheetah puppet operated by this beautiful dancer. And she says, what does the audience see? And we looked at her and said, I don't know what you're saying. She says, is the audience watching the puppet? Is the audience watching the dancer operating the puppet, the puppeteer? She said, no, the audience is watching the cheetah, but the cheetah doesn't exist. The cheetah is in the air in between the puppet and the puppeteer. The audience is. That's the third thing. So I live by the philosophy of the third thing. Even when an actor is doing a monologue, a lot of times I'll say, why are you working so hard? You're not letting your partner do anything. I don't have a partner. I'm doing a monologue. I said, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? And how is their reaction influencing you? That's part of your work. That exists in the air in between you. The same thing happens in our lives. One of the fundamental tenets of Christianity is the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You got the Father and Son, but what is the Holy Spirit? It's the most indefinable entity in that Trinity. There's a theological school of thought, and I think it's one of the fundamental core interpretations since early Christianity, and we kind of lost it. The Holy Spirit is that third thing, is that thing in the middle. It's the divine dance being done by the Father and the Son. It's that third thing.
That's so beautiful. I'm wrapped in this conversation, and I just want to keep talking about this all day.
One day, on our own.
We sure can. We could do like 3 parts of this, Thom.
But more importantly, you don't have to ever talk about it. You can actually, I hate to sound corny, you actually can try to live this every day.
Yes.
And realize and accept and wrap your head around the fact that there is never any sense of failure. It's just a step in a different direction.
Oh, that's so good.
Where does that lead you?
Yes.
Where does that lead you? It's so funny because when I came back from the Camino in 2016, it was just a couple weeks later, I started a job, and it was the first rehearsal that I'd been to post-Camino. And from the first day of rehearsal, things were different. What was different, Thom? I was open to happening there that I had never been before. You know, every actor, you do it, I do it, every actor I know talks about being in the moment.
Sure.
Never knew what that meant until I came back from the Camino.
Oh, what does it mean to you?
Being open. You know?
Absolutely.
I had surrendered, and I was courageous all of a sudden to fall back on 2 videos I watched recently, hosted by my dear friend Sierra Boggess, without knowing it, without realizing it. Those things came with being open, with being available. It fits into that definition that you read me at the beginning of this talk. Absolutely. There was no need for fear or nervousness because there was nothing to fear. There was just something that was available.
Something that was available that you were open to. You've nicely taken us in a full circle. Will you give us, for our Marination station, which my friend Rita Berglund has now deemed a cosmic spa.
It is.
Cosmics, isn't that just so brilliant?
It is. Well, you know what? It goes back to what I was saying before earlier. You know, when I was searching for all those other gods, I went in waist deep, but I didn't jump in.
What comes up for you of something that you want to highlight we can really focus on this week around openness?
I would say it's something that we say on the Camino. Just keep walking. Just keep walking. You're never going to walk in the wrong direction. Your walk is towards the center. It might be over there. It might be over there. But it heads here. So you keep walking. As you approach Santiago de Compostela, it's pretty much the last 2 weeks, the last 10 days that you're on pilgrimage. It gets very quiet. You've had all this fellowship, you've been walking hundreds of miles, and you're meeting people at cafes, and everybody's happy and cheerful. It's the definition of world peace, because there are people from all over the world just doing the same thing together and loving each other. And then all of a sudden, as you get closer and closer to your destination, it's very, very quiet and almost somber, solemn. People go into a kind of solitude, even if they might be walking together in a group, but you can sense this weight. It's not a sadness, but it's this thought that everyone is having. What am I going to do when I get there? How am I going to stop walking? And the comfort you take is in knowing what to say to another person who says that to you. It's almost like you don't even think about the words, but they come out of your mouth, they come out of your heart, they come out of your soul, out of your center. And you find yourself comforting another pilgrim and you're just saying, just keep walking. And at first you feel a little foolish when you hear that, but it's the inner pilgrim that's actually speaking. It's this inner pilgrim that you didn't know you have. You all have this inner pilgrim. And he's got nothing but boots and a pack on his back. That's all he has, she has, they have. Just keep walking. Just keep walking.
Just keep walking.
Buen camino.
Oh my God, Thom! Thank you so much for this. What a gift. I know everybody watching is freaking out because it's the best thing. Thank you so much for articulating so many beautiful things around the word of openness and sharing your story.
Be here. It's so special to very few of us have opportunities to articulate these things, and you know what it does, it sets a bar that you have to live up to.
That's right.
You know, a lot of times that I will wear a t-shirt that says Catholic on it and people laugh and they go like, oh, what religion are you? But I wear it not for anyone else. I wear it mostly for myself because it means that, wow, if I'm the only Catholic you ever see, I better be a really, really good person. So it's a challenge to me. So in a way, it's a challenge to me to talk about all these things because we never stop growing. We never stop changing. We never stop. All of these things are not things that I know, but things that I'm trying to learn.
Thank you for highlighting that. These aren't things that we know. These are things that we're trying to learn, and we're just articulating them. Yeah. Help remind ourselves and to give some peace to others that are also in their communities. Look at that full circle. I love you. I am so grateful for you. Thank you so, so much for all of this. What a gift. A gift you are to me and now to all the
There's a gift receipt in the box. So,
yes.
In case it doesn't work for you.
Let us see each other soon, please.
We will. We shall.
Yes. Thom! That was so good. That was so good.